Yes, guys. So this is round 10 of the Thursday Night League on the link back cliff drop layout. Now we qualified pole. We actually was in qualifying the fastest driver on track and in the race as well, which is always nice. Now mixed conditions. So part of the track is a little bit damp, part of it is dry. So I do quite like these conditions because it requires a lot more precision and skill. And yeah, it's just a bit quite fun now. We were sat on the grid for a very, very long time. I think there was some sort of issue with power or timing or something like that. So we were sat on the grid for a very long time. So the tyres are ice cold. Now, what I tend to see in my driving in these conditions, it takes me a couple of laps to get the temperature up in the tyres. So what you'll see at the start here is I dropped back into second and was kind of struggling to keep up. And then all of a sudden, the tyres started to get hot. And then we started to set some fast laps. And during this process, set the fastest lap of the race. Right then, so start of the race. So luckily I had one of my friends, Ben, behind me in a very fast kart, so he gives me a couple of nudges into turn one. Bit of oversteer there, and yeah, we get the whole shot. Now, as I was saying earlier, my driving style in these conditions, I need a little bit of front end grip, so I do tend to struggle a little bit on the first couple of laps where I've got no front temperature, especially because of the delay to the start. So kind of just skating on eggshells a little bit, but as you can see here, going into turn 5, trying to avoid the wet stuff, keep it on the dry stuff where generally shorter distance around the corner as well, and you can carry a little bit more speed. Coming down into the link back now, just covering my line a little bit. Again, just trying to hook it on that curb there. As the race went on, this corner got more and more slippy, especially going into this corner here. Just there, you can see it there, a bit of oversteer, weirdly enough. This corner here wasn't your typical wet line on this event, but for some reason the wet line was very slippy today on that corner, so it was kind of just V'ing it off, as you see there. This one here, the cliff drop, again, it's very slippy, so it's kind of just getting through it and not ending up in the wall. And again, this corner here, I always kind of play around with my lines in that turn 8. Sometimes I do a race line, sometimes I do a wet line if it's damp there. As you can see here, that line was pretty shit because I got passed down the straight, but Rich, that's Mr. Danby there. Rich had Rich, what you'll see in this here, Rich, this kart here is a fucking rocket as well. He is 10 kilos lighter than me, so obviously of course that plays a bit of a part in it, but yeah, there was definitely a bit of a kart advantage there as well, which I'm sure he'll love me saying. Right, so yellow flags already, shock horror. Yeah, this was quite, there was actually a full course yellow later on in the race, which you'll see. But yeah, now it's just a case of just allowing these tyres to warm up. There was a point in this race where probably about any time now really, where I was actually struggling to catch Rich, and I was starting to panic a little bit. But as soon as I could get a bit more feeling from the front end, the lap times, the lap times were coming down. I think I was nearly about a second a lap quicker in terms of lap time pace by the end of the race, with the fastest lap overall as well. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking now. I'll jump back in when something exciting happens. But yeah, this bit here is literally just me chasing Rich. Actually, when you get into this corner, you can see a variance in the line here. So he does the same line as me, but obviously you can see I'm kind of V'ing it off a lot more and steering a lot straighter on the exit. So I gained that kart length back there. And then obviously, as you'll see, when we go down the straight, so we're all over him here. And then when we go down the straight here, you'll see there'll be quite a large gap pulled down the straight, which again is probably a little bit of technique, a little bit of kart as well. But yeah, I mean, like you see that there, that's like a horrendously big gap already, and it just leaves it all the work to do in the twisty stuff. So yeah, anyway, enjoy the race. I will jump back in a bit. So at this point, I'm actually genuinely pretty concerned because the gap's actually quite big now. But at this point, we're about, what, 5 minutes or so into the race now. So now I can feel a little bit more feeling through the front end, and which, like I said before, for my driving style, that's key. And also body weight as well, because obviously being one of the heavier drivers, we haven't got the luxury of just being able to blast it down the straight. So we need to make the time through the corners, get perfect entries, exits, etc. And now the tyres are starting to get a little bit hotter. We can start closing the gap, which you'll see over the next couple of laps. Just got the little aerodynamic tuck there as well. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen me do that. Every half millisecond counts. It was quite slippy going into turn 10 there. There was a little patch kind of in the centre of the track that kind of just makes you oversteer a little bit. So some laps you'll probably see I get it perfect. Sometimes I drift wide, but there's just a little bit of the variance in the grip there. Now you just see me go around turn 1 there. Now it's quite funny because we all did the practice session, and we were having a little chat after the practice session. I was actually telling Rich I was doing the dry line around turn 1, and I wasn't. And as you see there, back at turn 1, he actually done the dry line. I did the wet line, and he actually pulled away from me. So what you'll probably see in the next lap or two is I start to adapt and do that line as well. But as you can see, the gap's starting to come down a little bit now. We're starting to put the hammer down. We're starting to get in that low 35 range, 135 range, which we were the only driver on the grid that got into the 35. So obviously now the gap's starting to come down a little bit. But weirdly enough, it's kind of like a lap of two halves, because there was parts of the track where Rich was actually pretty quick and I couldn't really catch, and then there was places like this where I would catch quite a lot. So it's just interesting to watch this back as well. So what you will see here now is we are starting to up the pace quite a bit, and we are closing the gap on Rich, and then in particular into 2 and 3 I seem to make quite a lot of time, as you're going to see here, quite a bit later on the brakes with more speed. Exits a lot tidier as well here. Now the key thing here, if you watch the difference in lines going into turn 4, obviously you can see Rich went quite wide there. I caught quite a lot up there, so at this point, I'm quite comfortable back on the bumper, so there was no major rush to get past. But also, as you can see ahead, we're catching back markers, and I always want to be the first person to the back markers, because I don't want to be influenced by some sort of mistake or whatnot. Which, funnily enough, you're about to see an incident where Rich kindly moves this lightweight out the way. Funnily enough, this is almost a carbon copy of an incident that happened a couple of weeks ago with me, and I got a 5 or 10 second penalty for that, and Rich didn't. So obviously Rich is in the good books, and I'm still in the bad books. But it didn't really matter anyway. So obviously now we took the lead, which the lead was gifted, but like I said, the pace was there. It was going to happen sooner or later. And now it's just about kind of just maintaining the gap, and just trying to keep as many back markers / lightweights in between us during these conditions, because it is very difficult when these conditions are like this. It's very difficult to overtake, so getting past cleanly and not getting involved in anyone else's mess is key, and that's basically what I was trying to do here. But I'll jump in again in a minute. I think there's going to be a little bit more action coming up pretty soon, so keep your eyes peeled. So, as you'll see now, we are starting to catch the next gaggle of lightweight slash back markers. So again, it's quite let's see that prime example right there is the exact thing you do not want to get caught up in. And that's the problem with these conditions, is that anyone can spin at any time. You see me tapping my arm there just to let them know I'm a heavyweight, to try not to overtake me back, because obviously there is the odd occasion where a back marker tries to race the race leader and cause them to have a crash, which is obviously not fun. But yeah, I believe we're about to get a full course yellow. So you can see a marshal running there to the barrier, because there's a cart fully face planted into the tyre wall there. So basically what that does, obviously not right now, but in a minute it will bring out a full course yellow, and we just get past this back marker before the full course yellow comes out, which is good because it puts a couple of people between me and the next heavyweight driver behind me, which is only going to help when the green flag goes again. So obviously we get a good run here. We kind of get side by side here. I'm just like, heavyweight, slow the fuck down, mate, let me past. And then obviously we were kind of like side by side slash I was a little bit in front, and then we see the yellow flag, so I was just like, right, I'm taking that. And then we just cruise around now for a nice long yellow flag. Now, obviously, the yellow flag was because I think it was Jimmy Holder, I think his second name is, a former Thursday Night League champion. He face planted into the wall, and obviously they had to get his car out of the wall, fix the track, all the rest of it. So yeah, it's going to be a couple of boring laps here, where obviously we're just going around a very slow pace to give the marshals the time they need to fix things and get things sorted, and obviously not putting them at risk by crashing into them. Obviously, in these conditions as well, it's very easy to make a mistake. I've had an issue in the past where I've tried to slow down on a wet track off the racing line, and I've ended up crashing as a result of it. So it's a difficult one. So it's just important to slow down, of course. Now, little to my knowledge, like I said, there was two back markers behind me, and then Rich was the third cart behind me. But I was actually quite surprised after the restart, which you'll see in a minute, how quickly Rich got past the two back markers and is on my arse again. So then it was obviously race on, and then what you'll see in a minute is obviously due to the yellow flag, everyone kind of closes back up. So then that kind of put us into the battle of like the podium of the lightweights, which was difficult because they're all battling for position, taking chunks out of each other, and I'm just trying to get through nice and cleanly and not get overtaken by Rich, who had closed in due to the yellow flag. So yeah, it's an entertaining couple of laps coming up. So I just took a chunk out of the clip there because it was just too boring. So as we're about to see, the light actually goes green now, and I was definitely caught napping here, and it definitely allowed the carts behind and Rich to close back up on me. So it was just a case now of like getting going, and obviously that's essentially the leaders of the lightweight group ahead, which this gaggle in front of us, I think we were about 2 to 3 seconds quicker than some of them. So obviously the gap gets eaten into really quick, and what you're going to see here is that they're taking chunks out of each other, and this is exactly what you don't want when you're coming to overtake people, because they're racing each other, and if you get side by side with them in any way, shape or form, they're probably just going to think you're racing them, and they're potentially could ruin your race when they're not actually in your race. So it's just about very carefully finding your way through, which you're going to kind of see in a minute here. This is actually a bit of an incident coming up here. So there's about 3 abreast going into the link back here. And obviously I get a good clean run through, and it's like, right, I don't really know where to go, so I'm just going to try and get past here, which I just about sneak through up the inside, but because I've gone from on the wet line tighter, it kind of ruins my exit. So Rich has actually come back for me there. Obviously there's a lot of contact here. We're actually about 3 abreast going into this chicane, and there was a cart on my inside here, and you can see I got a little tap there, but luckily it kind of hit me forward rather than sideways, because if he hit me sideways it would have been game over for me and Rich, because we would have probably both been in the tyre wall. But yeah, I think again I'm just showing him the band there just to let me pass, but obviously there was no letting me pass there. But yeah, I mean that was probably the closest point of the race in terms of like incident wise, where it could have gone either way. Like you've got another cart spinning there, and then these guys are all side by side, so I've got to punt one of them just to keep things moving. Obviously, I don't know where Rich is at this point because he might be right behind me, he might not be, but again, I've now got a real good run on these guys and managed to clear this gaggle pretty quickly. And I think this put me into 4th place overall in the actual race with the lightweights, which, considering we started about 30 odd seconds behind, is pretty decent. But I think if if there was a couple more laps, we probably could have caught right up to the leader. So. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think this potentially is the final lap now, so we're just going to finish this lap and then take the win. Again, obviously, I'm not really sure who's behind me. I'm not really paying too much attention. I'm just making sure I'm hitting the apexes, getting good exits, and I'm pretty confident if I do that, I've done enough to win. And as we're as I said, we're still catching these guys in front. I was a little bit wide there, which was a little bit annoying. I was quite concerned going into the cliff drop if I was going to get passed or not by a lightweight, but obviously I didn't, so that is good. Again, just hitting that inside curb there, which kind of just helps with the rotation on the exit. This corner I was experimenting a lot with the dry and the wet line. Couldn't really find one I was overly happy with, so I was kind of just manipulating the line based on how my entry was, if I broke a little bit later or if I was a little bit tighter for whatever reason. But yeah, this is the final lap, coming into the final couple of corners now, and like I said, we take the heavyweight win, and with this win we've now taken the championship lead. So with the 4 drop rounds, so without drop rounds I'm not actually leading it, but with the drop rounds I am leading it by about 4 points, I think 5 points. So yeah, 2 rounds left. There's about 5 points between a couple of drivers, so it's going to be exciting.